card. Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
My Readier Room.
Welcome to the Readier Room, not to be confused with Captain's Log. This is the only TNG rewatch podcast with actual insights from those who were there to see the magic happen. My name is Mitchell Sigrist, former Chief Consultant of Services at Paramount Studios, and with me as always is my life partner Brandon Hobbs, former Head of Resources Management. Brandon, how you doing today, this week?
Doing great, Mitch. It's a beautiful 18 degrees Fahrenheit here, and I'm sitting down with a steaming hot cup of Earl Grey, and I'm ready to talk Trek.
Wow, that is the perfect Trek discussion environment.
Is it not?
Anytime you can make your tea hot, I always just feel just a little bit like Jean-Luc, you know? You stand in front of the stove with your kettle on, and to nobody in particular, you're like, computer, Earl Grey tea, hot. And I always make myself chuckle. Yeah, it's a good time. So today, for our third consecutive week of episodes, a new record, we are going to talk about episode 3 of The Next Generation, which is Code of Honor. And dare I say that this is the most topical episode that we have encountered thus far, especially in this current year, this current climate of happenings around the world. There's talks in this episode of vaccines, talks of racial relations, and it's a meaty apple to bite into. There's a lot to tackle here.
Definitely.
So much so that I don't really know where to start. Because the quality of the episode is, it is what it is. It's not so good. But what the episode means, what it stands for, what happened during the production is, I think, the more interesting of the two halves here. And just to really magnify that, there's the whole concept of the episode was initially the subject of a very, very heavy debate, which I'm sure you know, but I want to tell everybody to kind of set the stage for where we are as a production crew coming into this.
Sure.
Right, so in this episode, like, the basic plot is that Natasha Yar is kidnapped by this tribal, African-influenced alien race, and because of navigating the pitfalls of diplomatic relations, the Enterprise has to bend over backwards to get her back in a way that's relatable or amenable to everybody, while also preserving relations that they can get this like valuable vaccine from this alien race. But the thing is that this plot hinges on the idea that this alien race would find Tasha Yar desirable enough to go through this effort of kidnapping her and like doing all this stuff, because as soon as she meets the king of this alien race, he's immediately taken with her, and it's a whole thing. Now, what makes this so controversial is that so many of our writers, almost half of the writing staff, just could not believe that Tasha Yar, Denise Crosby, would be so immediately desirable to somebody to cause this kind of drama. Arguments were being thrown around left and right. People are like, I mean, just look at her. This isn't going to work. The audience is never going to buy this. The other side was like, well, it's science fiction. A lot of strange things can happen. We can explain it. And it really just dragged on for days and days and days. I mean, ultimately, the episode got made. You know who won, but it really begs the question of just considering that that alternate timeline where cooler heads won out, and we weren't forced to consider the ramifications of Tasha Yar being one of the more attractive members of the crew. It's kind of weird to say, but
well, right. So I mean, you remember that opinion extended far beyond the writers' room. You remember that day on the set, right?
Oh my god.
Where there's that particular line that Troy has to say, where she's telling Riker, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Troy needs to. Did I say Tasha? I meant Troy.
You said
right?
Troy. You said Troy.
I said Troy?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's that particular line that Troy needs to say where she's telling Riker that they took Yar because of how attractive Yar is.
Right.
And I remember that line took Marina dozens and dozens of takes to deliver without breaking down in laughter.
That was one of my favorite days on set throughout the entire series.
Yeah. I mean, because it really didn't take long before everyone was laughing with her.
Right.
And the entire day was just hilarious.
It was. It was one of those situations where, like, everybody was so primed to laugh that, like, one random, cameraman would giggle, and then suddenly everybody was chain reaction.
Yeah, and we could not make it through. But I'll tell you who wasn't laughing.
Yeah.
Denise.
Well, it was unfortunate. She kind of wandered onto set in the latter half of it and just stood there in the shadows watching. And by the time anybody noticed, it was too late. But it was great because there were elements of mirth among the crew, right? We really needed that at the time, considering a lot of the other things that were happening. But it was a fun day. It was a fun day. I mean, you just got to roll with the punches. Denise eventually quit, so it was fine.
All's well that ends well, right?
Yeah, exactly. But what didn't end well, I think, is this episode itself.
Yeah. So, I mean, that little anecdote was probably the only little brief bit of levity we got to the entire production of this thing.
Right.
Even going beyond the production and airing of this episode.
There's just nothing in it. Like, you watch the finished product, and it's a big old nothing burger. Like, what do you...
It's
What's
very
the value?
bad. It's pretty insane when, we started off watching the pilot, and we thought, well, it can't get any worse from here.
And
then it got worse. It's just steadily gotten worse and worse.
Very consistently dipping in quality. And it makes you think, is this like a linear growth or an exponential growth in how much worse these episodes get over season 1? So why doesn't this episode work? What's so bad about it? I think the biggest issue that we found was that it has so much going on in the episode that, like, it doesn't gel very well. So just to go in, like, order, you have this diplomatic meeting during which, like, Tasha Yar attacks one of the diplomats for no real reason, and nobody seems to care. Then there's a kidnapping. There's the concept of the vaccine. There's, like, a lesson in cultural education during which the Enterprise crew members forget what the Prime Directive is. There's a fight scene. There's resurrection from the death. There's this reveal that the society that has, through all this time, like, subjugated women is actually like a matriarchal-based society, and the leader is chosen by who the top woman wants to fuck. That wasn't very clear. That didn't make sense. There's Wesley Crusher character development thrown in when he's not involved in the plot at all. There's a random scene of Geordi shaving. There's so much happening, and none of it makes for a really compelling narrative. Half of the top scenes are people just walking around on the African tribal planet, just looking at weapons and being like, oh, what are we gonna do? Oh, they have honor. Well, we have to defeat them honorably. Or, like, what? This is fucking dumb. Yeah,
and I have to just make a note that the entire script hinges on every character either making an extremely stupid decision or a very out of character decision.
Yeah, and it feels so cheap. It's not earned, is how I would describe.
It's definitely not earned. Like, every scene is a means to the end whereby the Enterprise actually comes into conflict with this society that they need a vaccine from.
Right.
But it does not at all, like you said, gel. It doesn't flow naturally at all. There's no real reason. In a later episode of this show, this conflict like just couldn't have happened because there was no way to write an episode this stupid.
Right. I mean, I mentioned it. I think the most glaring issue is just the misuse of the phrase prime directive, which is insulting because a lot of the best episodes of TNG over its run are prime directive episodes, and they always very consistently have this standard of what they should and should not be doing with not yet developed planets, which is what the prime directive is really about. Once somebody's capable of intergalactic travel and teleporting, which this race is, they're not subject to the prime directive. Nobody's like engaging with the Romulans and like, oh, we can't mess with them because of the prime directive. We want to influence their culture during this war we're having with them. It's like,
right.
It's fucking stupid.
And on top of that, and we discussed this while we were watching it, it's very hard to suspend your disbelief that there is a race of human-like people who have developed a vaccine that the entire Federation can't get their hands on, but also have such backwards tribal-like customs.
Right.
Which, again, the entire conflict hinges on that, too. But it doesn't make sense that the Enterprise would be dealing with a situation where they need something that race has.
Yeah. Anything that they should that race has, the Federation should be able to match them on technology.
Yeah, definitely. It's just very clumsy.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, it's a resource of their planet that's making this vaccine, but then they go through this trouble of like, oh, Dr. Crusher can't replicate it because that would ruin the plot. And it's like, all right, if you're gonna if you're gonna make such contrivances, at least do so in service of a plot that's worth it. And not just like a fucking just I don't even know how to describe it. The plot of this episode, because it's pulling from all these like strange ideas that are coming together. Like the show had two writers, and
it had two writers. Yep.
And like one of them had this idea, I don't remember the full story, and the other one another idea, and they kind of like mashed them together, and this is what we got.
The way it started out actually. So we had two writers, a man and a woman. Catherine Powers and Michael Barron.
Okay.
And initially, actually, Catherine's idea had to do with the race of lizard people or something.
Right. Yes. I remember that being pitched.
That never panned out, probably because it would have taken too much effort. So what actually ended up happening was that both of these writers did end up having their own unique idea for an episode. It wasn't necessarily one episode, at the very beginning. Catherine's idea evolved into this idea of this African alien race that kidnaps one of the white women on the Enterprise and holds them hostage.
I remember it was very explicit in the treatment that she handed everybody. It was one of the white women on the Enterprise.
Oh yeah. It had to be a white woman for reasons that I'm not really sure of.
I don't question the talent. I mean, they are capable of much more than we are. So I'm sure that there was a reason.
Certainly. And then Barron's treatment centered around this climactic fight between two women. This is going to be like the ultimate scene in the episode. This fight between two women. One of whom was a Cation.
Yes.
That humanoid cat species from the animated series, I believe it was.
Right. It was a callback.
Yeah, it was a callback. It was a nice little reference. But ultimately, you see how these two kind of merge together, and we never really did get the Cation, unfortunately. But
they pushed for it. But
they pushed for it. But yeah, so that's where we started out.
And it's not a surprise that when you're making an episode that's an amalgam of several people's ideas that it doesn't flow as cohesively. And like, not only were there several writers, there were several directors too. It's such a it's such a an episode by committee. You know, like, yes, of course we have a writer's room where people hone ideas and pitch them back and forth, but this is really so many fingers in this pie. If I dare say
definitely.
So. Like,
and
go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh wow, thank you, Mitch.
Yeah, no problem.
I was just going to say that because of that, and also almost in spite of that, this episode got made, because the thing that I think jumps out to most people about this episode is, of course, the race of African tribal aliens, right?
Yes.
And that decision is obviously questionable, obviously very strange. This episode could have worked out if they had taken the same kind of cultural, societal idea and just not made all of the aliens black.
Right.
But this decision by the writers would ultimately echo very, very far out into the casting process.
Yes.
Right? And I seem to recall there was a lot of drama with that.
There was, like, mostly with our interns, they kind of got the short end of the stick when it came to that casting process.
Yeah. And so essentially what happened is the script calls for the Enterprise crew to go down to the planet. Right? And we need a lot of extras, in a similar way that we needed so many extras for the pilot episode.
Star Trek in the early episodes used a lot more extras on average, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And honestly, I think it really just comes down to how genius Gene was about sourcing these actors. So we needed a lot of African American people, right?
So where do you go for that?
Where do you go for that? And I wouldn't be able to tell you, right?
Right.
I wouldn't. And so I think it was Gene's idea to recruit at the local dog track.
Right.
It just genius. So what ended up happening was we covered a bunch of people's bets if they agreed to work with us for a couple hours.
Right. It was a very, like, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. And it was an economical decision. It was very, very cheap. They weren't covered by the union. Didn't have to be. So it just worked out incredibly well. But yeah, I mentioned it before, man. Those poor interns, they did not know what they were getting into when like, Gene put them all in a minivan, drove them down to the track, and was like, all right, you guys get out, just approach we need older, like 30 plus African Americans, ask them if they want to be on TV, make sure they're black enough. It's the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's just it. The black enough thing. Do you remember this? With how they read their lines? Oh.
Well, yeah, that's a good story. That's a good one.
Yeah. Do you want to tell it?
Yeah. I can get into it.
I'll leave the racial drama to you. I know that's your expertise.
Yeah, that's really what I want to talk about. So this was on the first day of shooting, and all the extras show up on set in their African costumes, and we start shooting. And so, of course, Gene was on set. And the only thing about this particular situation was that Gene pretty much always skipped the table reads.
Right.
Always. He said they were boring, and far be it for me to question his genius, right?
Right.
But so this is his first time. This is his first time seeing this, and we're doing the first takes, and the actors are doing great. And in the middle of the shot, Gene yells "cut" and just calls the director over to the corner, and they're having a very heated 5-10 minute discussion before the director meekly walks back to the set, and he calls over the the extras, and well, no, not the extras. All the those with the lines, right?
Right, from the African
From
society.
the African society, yeah. And he says, and I quote, "Could you read the lines more like a savage, like an African savage?" And all the while, Gene's standing in the back, scowling at them and nodding his head. And this really, really set the tone for the remainder of the production. And this particular director, I think, ended up having quite a bit of trouble.
Yeah.
With Gene.
You want to talk about that? Because we can talk about that because I think a lot of people do not know the true happening of this story. Like it's pretty well known that this episode had 2 directors, one got fired. Why? Everybody's got their own theories. Will Wheaton thinks he was a racist. It's a whole thing. If you ask, so the director himself, Russ Maybury, he'll say that he was fired because of his casting decisions, and that's actually true. Now, we got a lot of the extras from the track, as we mentioned, but some of them were just like Russ's friends. He had a lot of black friends. Like, you guys want to be in Star Trek? I'm directing this television show. Come on, just put on this turban and walk around. It'll be fine. The thing is, at one point in the episode, we see that Yar is being escorted by one of these African guards, but his eye is all fucked up. It looks very strange. It's swollen. It's closed. It doesn't look right, and it's not at all related to the plot. Nobody comments on it.
It's very obvious when you watch the episode,
right? And it's one of those head scratchers. Why? Well, that was one of Russ's friends, and he showed up that day with just a very clear and obvious case of pink eye. It was bizarre. So he goes in the makeup, and the makeup guys are pretty confident that they can just cover it up. It'll be fine. We got to get this production rolling. We don't have time to go find somebody else. Just get him out there, go do the shot, and pick up your $50 and go home. Well, what ended up happening was that pink eye spread around the cast and crew like a fucking SARS plague. It was wild.
That's right.
Yeah, we had to shut down production for 2 months.
I seem to remember you enjoying a bout of pink eye from that little debacle.
It was not fair. I never even met the guy, and yet I get pink eye 2 days later, 2 days after this rando is gone from the set. It really halted. Like I said, it halted production when every level of the production crew is stricken with incurable disease. What are you going to do? So take a 2-month break. Everybody's kind of stewing about it. We come back. Suddenly there's a new director. No word about it. Never explained. In fact, he didn't even introduce himself. He just sat in a chair and said action. It's wild. But that is the true story. And now you know. It's another one of those mysteries solved.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's nice about this episode is the ongoing cultural ramifications, I think. A lot of people watch this and they're like, oh, I'm very, very happy to see more black people in Star Trek. And actually, and I don't want to give out too many details on this because this is not my wheelhouse. It's not my room to say. But I do have it on good authority that this episode was the direct inspiration for the adaptation of a certain Marvel superhero comic to the big screen. And I'm not going to say which one. I don't want to give up the ghost. I'll just say Ligon 2 Forever. And I'll leave it at that.
That's very interesting. And I can definitely see the parallels there,
Right.
Advanced African society that through their own hubris and ignorance still participates in obscenely violent tribal norms that don't make any sense.
It was all intentional. It was a direct parallel to what was going on in Code of Honor.
Wow, right. That's interesting.
So if you enjoy the work of one Chadwick Boseman, perhaps you owe Code of Honor a thank you.
Starting to make me think now.
Right? Who could it be?
So for all of the positive impacts, you might say, this episode has had for the African American community, I seem to recall that at the time of airing, that was not so much the case, or in terms of the reception from the audience.
Well, the climate at the time was already pretty hostile between us and the African Americans at large.
True.
So it was this whole thing, right, with the only black characters we had on the show. People were very, very unhappy. See, initially we thought, like, oh man, we got...
Which doesn't make much sense to me, but...
No, I was just thinking, oh man, we got Geordi, we got the first black Klingon, Worf. It's perfect. Like, this is going to be a very, very progressive, forward-looking show. But no, instantly everybody was just kind of coming down on it. Why are the only black characters on the show? Why are they both aliens? Why does one look like a fucking robot with a visor that obscures his eyes? Why does this one have a completely deformed head? All of the African American characters were just basically space aliens in the eyes of the casual viewer. In fact, a lot of people were complaining that, like, Data, the android, looked more human than Geordi, an actual human.
Oh, yeah.
The dehumanization of our African American actors was a very big sticking point. And when this episode aired, that did not go away. I mean, when the episode is centered around a race of entirely black, braggadocious tribal warriors who fail to grasp societal norms of the Federation while stealing a non-insignificant percentage of their white women, it was not received very well. The mailroom at Paramount around that time was not a very fun place to be.
No, it was not. It was not. But I can see where these people are coming from. It's a very strange decision to make, for sure. But I want to pivot from all the talk about race, which is very topical, mind you.
Right.
Very important discussion to have.
Got to start the conversation somewhere.
Yeah, and we started it here, and hopefully we can guide our audience down the path of correctly thinking about these kinds of things.
I believe Captain's Log is going to also do their piece on this next week.
Yeah.
So
I did hear.
Be sure to tune into our friends there in the Captain's Log for more race relations Star Trek talk.
Yeah, but for now, I'd like to pivot to probably the only other important part of this episode, which is when they go down to the planet.
Yes.
And there's two things I want to talk about there, both mostly relating to set design.
Yeah.
Where they touch down on the planet and they're talking with the leader or whatever, and he tells them to come to some feast. And the shot opens on what you said looks like a literal theater stage.
Right. There's just like a blank screen in the back that's just moodily lit.
It's supposed to be an orange sky, I imagine, because all of the tribes people are sitting around, surrounded by foliage and stuff like that. But I honestly could not tell when that shot opened that we were supposed to be outside.
Yeah,
it just looked so horrible.
It looks like a daytime talk show the way that set was arranged. It was really bad.
I have no idea what they were thinking. What they were like, it just looks so terrible. And I don't know whose fault that is. I don't know who was designing the set for that, but
hope they got fired.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
So, and it gets worse too because they go to like this playground jungle gym to have the final fight. And
the entire set's just shaking around.
Right, it's like one of the actresses grabs onto it, and it just shakes because it's got no stability. It's so cheaply made. And
and they're climbing around a jungle gym with those stupid spiked things on their hands.
Oh my god, those stupid things! So we didn't even make those things.
Wait, what?
That was not our prop. So our prop master on TNG was, everybody's got friends in Hollywood. It's just how it works. It's about your connections. And
Of course.
when you're a budding series, you try to cut as many corners, cut as much money as you can, just to make the production actually happen. You gotta get a prop, even if you don't have the money to make one. And, well, actually, let me ask. I'll ask you. I'll ask the viewer at home. That prop was not our prop. What work, film or television show, do you think that prop was borrowed from?
I can't even think of what was airing around that time that would.
Well, it was actually an older film. I think it came out like 10 years before our production, maybe like 6. But those stupid like mitts with the nails on them and like the big knife jutting out of it, that was taken from Mad Max.
Oh no!
Yeah, and you can kind of tell it's got that jerry-rigged, not actually like one object, but a bunch of shit like duct taped together kind of feel to it. All we had to do was spray paint them gold, and they were perfect for this kind of thing. You can kind of see them.
I can see that.
You can see them like jiggle around on the actresses' arms because they were made for much larger actors, like men.
Right.
But yeah, it still ended up working. I would say that was a lot more successful than the set was. Which, again,
it definitely was.
Yeah, it was like these jungle gym with lasers coming out of it. It was bizarre. But I think that in a lot of TNG, and not even just early TNG, later TNG too, the sets were not so sturdy and not so like perfectly made. If you look at like random screens around the Enterprise or random consoles, you can see hints that they're just thrown together for TV magic and not nearly anything functional.
Oh, for sure.
But,
for sure.
Yeah, like this is very, very. You can't hide this. You can't like suspend your disbelief about it, like you can with some.
No,
I
think. I think if nothing else, they eventually learned how to avoid situations like these where the entire set, which is obviously made from like plastic,
right,
is not being interacted with so much.
I want to ask you a question, not about this, but about something else in the episode. How do you feel about that small Wesley Crusher development that's going on?
Yeah, you would think that would be part of a quote Wesley episode, but no, it's just kind of thrown in there. It seems a little out of place.
It definitely seems out of place.
It goes nowhere. Like, he doesn't help with anything.
That's the
surprisingly.
Thing.
He doesn't save the day.
Yeah, you think he's quite good at that these days. But I would think that because I like it in concept, but I wish it did figure into the main plot of the episode because it's a very easy thing to do. Like they've already essentially done Wesley saving the day before, so why make this the B story? When in an episode so crowded with otherwise incongruent things. So I like it, but I don't think it was handled very well. Concept is good, though.
Yeah, the concept is good. And, I mean, though ultimately that's where his character was going to be going anyway.
Right.
So it really is all about where they place it into any given episode, and this episode was not the right one. I did appreciate his acting a little bit more though, maybe because there was less of it. But
yeah,
I think he performed better in this episode than the Naked Now, which was nice.
Definitely true, and I think there's a little bit of unintentional comedy, which I enjoyed, with how they kind of once he starts like sitting at consoles and doing things. They're just like very cavalier about like, all right, Wesley, you do it. You drive the ship. You be the captain.
Yeah.
Riker does that like Riker smile at him. He's like, all right, Wesley, you're in control. I'm gonna go to fucking point forward.
Yeah, you steer the ship during this moment of crisis.
Right. It's do you remember when they just like fired into space for no reason? They shot their phasers.
Oh my god! Yeah, see, that's another part of when I mentioned that the script hinges on out of character decisions. It's like Picard would never. I mean, despite the fact that they're a warning shot, I don't think Picard would ever fire a warning shot like that in later episodes as a first choice.
Right. They're in the middle of like diplomatic tense relations and negotiations as like they're committing this terrorist act, and Picard is like, just fucking shoot the phasers. Shoot them in the space.
Yeah, and he's just going to agitate them more. That makes no sense. Oh, another Picard thing was his weird French pride this episode.
Yeah.
You remember that?
That was weird. I get his name is Jean-Luc, and he has like an affinity for old things like archaeology and whatnot. Although I don't know if that was established at this point, but yeah, Data's like, oh, French is an archaic language that nobody speaks anymore, and Picard's basically like, excuse you, French is a cultured sign of culture back on Earth, and Data's like,
right, and then he starts pouting, and Riker kind of has to like cool him off.
Right, and he's like, Data, I think you should drop it. And then he does that stupid Riker grin again.
Yeah, I think that Picard's French pride was actually supposed to be like a character quirk, and they thankfully realized that it was stupid, and they dropped it. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of strange mannerisms from all the characters we know and love in these early episodes. Like, Data is still very, very I don't know what's the word. Annoying.
Yeah, he's very
like,
fish out of water.
Yeah, way too fish out of water to be funny in any way.
Right. And I don't know how long that's gonna last, but it is extremely grating.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of that uncanny valley thing where it's like, all right, it looks like Picard, it sounds like Picard, but it's not Picard.
It's not Picard. Yeah. You're right. It definitely makes it worse knowing these characters and then going back and watching them act almost like themselves, but not quite.
And this time it's without the veneer of the intoxication from the naked now to hide it.
Right, now they don't have an excuse.
Yeah, now it's just bad writing.
I also want to talk a little bit more, maybe just briefly, about what's her name? Why am I
Crusher? Yar?
Crusher,
Okay.
yeah. Crusher bringing that African woman back to life, or the African dude.
No, it was the woman.
Was it?
It was the woman.
Right, yeah, it was the woman. Yeah, she just brings her back to life.
Yeah, and nobody's like...
No one bats an eye.
Yeah. There's like, okay, she was dead. I can show you the medical record. She fucking died. And then I brought her back.
Right.
And we're just like, what?
Yeah,
You didn't
I don't
do
think...
that.
I don't think they use whatever technology was used here. I don't think they use it ever again to bring someone back to life.
Which is a shame, because you would think that would be very useful.
Oh, certainly.
It's where the science fiction reaches the realm of just magic, which is never where you want to be.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you remember when Crusher comes onto the bridge and just like starts reading an email on Riker's console, and they're like, "Oh,
yeah,
the sickness in this planet is getting worse," and it's like, why is that information on the captain's console? It's essentially just like a telegram email. Why is Crusher reading it there?
They have news feeds. They have news feeds on their little computers on the bridge. It's very strange. And yeah, the decision to make Crusher come over to the captain's chair and read it by bending over Riker and looking at a tiny screen was very strange.
Right. And it obviously it's just like, oh, it's so tense. There's a lot of tension here. We really got to solve this problem now because the vaccine or the sickness is getting worse. Like, fuck off.
Yeah.
It's so transparent. It's such bad writing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I have a challenge. Find a scene where one character goes into the room on the Enterprise of another character in season 1 that is well written. Because last time we had Geordi walking into Wesley Crusher's room and just talking about his inventions and then leaving, all without any motivation, and it was just ridiculous. In this episode, we have Data walking into Geordi's room while he's shaving, again, for no real reason, and it's just completely ridiculous. So the challenge...
It's a complete non sequitur.
It is. Find a scene in season 1 of one character walking into another's room, another's quarters, and tell me it's well written. We'll see if that ever happens.
God, I guess it remains to be seen.
It does.
But we'll definitely we'll keep track of this one.
It's a fun challenge because it's
at the end of the season we can rank the best character entering another character's room scenes.
Oh, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, that's going to be nice.
Because there's nothing to hide behind in scenes like that. It's just character interactions. So it's just dialogue, really.
Yeah.
And I think, as we all know, dialogue at this point is not anybody's particular skill.
Mm-hmm.
So the last point that I have here that I wanted to talk about was going back to what you said before about how difficult it is to accept of this like tribal nation outclassing the Federation.
Yeah.
And we talked about this while we were watching it, but I think it's a good discussion to have. Compare the implausibility of that to the implausibility of the Klingons doing the similar thing, because Klingons are another backwards warrior tribal society, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they have matched the Federation enough to have a war with them that wasn't just immediately over.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like
they actually have like a developed society that makes some kind of sense. I mean, you don't have to put in effort to suspend your disbelief about why they act the way they do, or the fact that they can be successful under their social hierarchical systems.
There's that episode, or rather, it's more like an arc, I think in season 4, where there's a power struggle within Klingon society, and it sheds a lot of light on that, and it's a lot of like strict rituals and power-based decision making, tribalism stuff,
right?
And I don't know if I bought it then. It's you take a threat like the Romulans, and it's like, yeah, they're kind of a ruthless race, but they also have like a very sophisticated, organized society. To the point where I get it. I get why they have like these cloaking devices and phasers and such. Not phasers, disruptors that are just like really, really high tech. Like, I get it. But with the Klingons, I don't know if I accept it as readily as you do. I accept that they would be like good fighters, but I would also expect them to be like in a tin can that the Federation just fucking explodes. Because while, Klingons were studying the blade, everybody else in the galaxy was studying astrophysics.
Yeah, I guess so. But I think a lot of that is portrayed in just the build of their ships. They look very, I don't know, primitive, I think.
They do.
When you see the interiors of the bridges and stuff.
They do, but then why aren't they primitive? They look primitive, but they're
yeah,
just
I know.
not.
They pretty much go toe-to-toe. They go toe-to-toe with the Federation, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess it's something I've just always taken for granted because it's the Klingons. They're such a part of the greater cultural zeitgeist,
right?
That I've known them to exist for my entire life,
Yeah. And I'm not necessarily like poking holes in that. Like, it's fine to suspend our disbelief for it, especially because Klingons work very well as a foil to how the Federation conducts business. But the point I was making is that you technically should be able to suspend your disbelief in the same way for the society scene in this episode. But you just kind of can't. And it's weird when it's like, oh, well, this one, they have a bunch of forehead prostheses? Prosthetics. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, a bunch of forehead prosthetics. So now I can accept that they've made these technological strides despite being, Oonga Boonga. And it's like, no, these other people look too much like people, so I can't accept it. Well, I mean, they are people. They don't look like people. They are people.
Oh, no.
But yeah, it's a kind of insight into how our minds work for this kind of thing.
Right.
I don't know. I wouldn't quite call it like uncanny valley, 'cause I don't think that's really applicable here. But when something is too similar, we need just a small gap from true humanity to accept unknowable things.
Yeah, some of the more far-fetched things can be kind of excused when you think you're dealing with something that's not human.
Exactly. So
But I also think that we've spent, at this point in the overall series, we've spent so much time with Klingons,
right,
that, you're just so used to them being what they are.
Well,
and I think it's a matter of like how they've been slowly introduced over the years.
I'm not gonna make it's obviously very valuable, but imagine you're like me and you haven't seen the original series or the animated series before dealing with TNG, and your first exposure to a Klingon is Worf, and he's like got this weird sash, and he's just a strange guy. It's like, all right, I guess. I'm not sure how I don't quite remember how they were introduced like gradually in this series. Like, what's the ramping up they get here? I remember very vividly the what I mentioned before, that kind of power struggle in season 4, but before that, I don't know how much focus they get, and maybe that's like the big introduction of them for new fans. I don't know.
I don't remember either, actually,
but in this case, the fact that Worf is on the crew, I think, kind of also helps bridge that gap. Where you're like, all right, Worf's sophisticated enough to be on the bridge of the Enterprise, so yeah, I can accept whatever else they're gonna throw at me.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point, and it's going to be interesting to kind of think along those lines going forward. But there definitely is something about. I think you are right in a certain way about this particular alien race just being made up of black people,
right.
And that not working to its benefit. And I think lots of other people have kind of already made this point, even if whether or not they realize that that's why they're making it, it's just like, I think everyone kind of universally agrees that it was just awkward to cast this race like this.
Right. And it's not something that,
for multiple reasons,
that is really repeated throughout the rest of TNG. And, they'll do like really small things like, oh, it's a race of human looking people that all have a lion on their cheek, like, whatever. But it's no, I mean, actually they do this. There's that late season episode where they have the Indians, like the American Indians, the Native Americans.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
So, remember that one?
And you would think that they would have learned, but that was a season 7 episode. They had the entire run of the show to reflect on Code of Honor, and they just didn't. And that episode has a lot of things up with it. Wesley Crusher literally has a vision quest guided by a mystical Native American mentor. There's a Trail of Tears comparison.
It's almost like they learned nothing. In fact, that one might even be worse.
Yeah, because it doesn't have we're new, we made some, nobody was really paying attention, we made some bad decisions. It was one of the biggest shows on TV, and you did this. Everybody on set was like, yeah, this will work.
Yeah, you actively had to be trying to make something offensive.
Right. Well, at least it's not transphobic.
That's true.
Before we go, do you want to talk about Data's tongue slipping?
It sounds like you do.
I kind of do.
All right.
This is one of those things I feel bad talking about. I feel like really nitpicky talking about. But I'm just going to say it. An android's tongue does not slip. They don't mispronounce words. That doesn't make sense. Not in a way that they would immediately catch themselves. It's like, oh, you program them to say it wrong. Sure, whatever. Or their AI learns it wrong. Fine. But no, it's not just like, oh, I said a tongue twister and I couldn't keep up. Completely ridiculous. Oh,
Right,
and
right.
he's numbering his jokes because he's such a robot. Like, no.
And also, and the tongue slip thing, we've already established Data as a character who apparently wouldn't say stuff like that because it's not literal enough,
Right.
right? Like in the Naked Now, he's sitting at his computer asking what
Needle in a
I can't
haystack.
remember. Two birds with one stone. Yeah, needle in a haystack.
Right.
What needle in a haystack means. We've already established Data as a character who does not say things if they're not literal, which obviously changes much for the better later on. But at this point, to add that little line, my tongue slipped. Yeah, it makes no sense.
Right.
Was this when Data walks into Geordi's room?
Yeah, because he walks into Geordi's room, I think, just to tell him a joke. He's like, Geordi, I've got joke number 663. You're gonna love it. And then he tells him the joke, and Geordi hates it. And then his tongue slips while explaining the joke, and Geordi like guffaws at him, despite it also not being all that funny.
Right.
Yeah, it was. Oh my god, I'm so angry with the way that they treat Data in these early seasons. Data's
it's very
is probably my favorite character, and this is just essentially not Data. Like, Data is very rigid rules to what makes Data. I talked about this last week, but it's so dumb.
I think we're going to be talking about it every week.
I'll talk about it every time it comes up. God damn it!
No, because it's so jarring, and Data is probably a lot of people's favorite character. He brings a lot of life to the show,
Right?
And when he's not doing that, solely because of an issue with the writing, it's frustrating.
Right. Imagine writing in like the emotion chip subplot into season 1 Data. Like, season 1 Data is making human mistakes. He's getting drunk. He's having sex, and then he'd be like, "Oh, I wonder what it's like to have emotions." Like, that wouldn't work at all.
Right. Yeah. It's now that you mention it, it's very straight. Like, Data does a lot of human things, but he doesn't act like a human.
Right.
He doesn't like emote, or not emote, but like he doesn't. He is so obviously non-human in his dialogue that the juxtaposition of that versus when he's like, screwing around with Tasha.
Yeah.
It's very strange. Whereas later seasons,
he gets kind of jealous over Tasha in this episode. They like go to meet her on the planet, and she was abducted by this guy, and I think someone asks Tasha like if she slept with him or if she's gonna marry him or accept his proposal or something, and Data's immediately on it. It's like, oh, what'd you say? Like, what are you gonna do? Like,
yeah. So really, we're just looking at no consistency here with Data
at all,
which is fine.
What's your favorite Data episode, real quick?
Oh, favorite Data episode. That's too tough. I can't answer that on the spot like that.
I think mine, I forget the name of it. It's the one where he's abducted by like this collector of rare things.
That was a good one, yeah.
At the end, he actually like tries to kill him before he's beamed out, and it's like, oh, Data's gonna fucking kill a guy. Jesus.
Yeah.
And also,
that was a good one.
Everybody thinks he's dead at the beginning of the episode, and Picard's just like, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
Her fucking robot's dead. Who cares? We'll build another one. Good times in data history. All right, I think that's gonna just about do it. Do you have anything else you wanted to touch on before we close episode 3 of the Readier Room?
Well, we might as well close it with a little anecdote.
I like it. I like it.
So, going back to the scene in Geordi's room, right? Where
it all comes back to the scene in Geordi's room.
It all comes back to, I mean, much like a lot of last episode came back to the scene where Geordi walked into Will Wheaton's room.
This is why we're going to pay so much attention to the character walks into other characters' quarters scenes.
There's so much to work with. And so Geordi, and you'll remember how awkward this looks when we were watching it. Geordi's using this, like, I don't know, smooth blue cube thing.
Oh, yeah.
To shave, and it's not even making contact with his face.
Right, he's just holding it.
And yeah, he's just holding it, and it just looks like a block. And there's this line of dialogue from Data where he mentions like calibrating the razor or something.
Right.
So thereby implying that it's some kind of fancy space razor, right? Meanwhile, the audience again is just sitting there watching Geordi move this block in front of his face. But it is in fact true that it was supposed to be a fancy space razor.
Right.
There was supposed to be this special effect of this mild phaser beam shooting out from it onto Geordi's face,
to actually shave him.
Actually save him, yeah. But it never got finished in time. We were under crunch. We just couldn't get it done. So we just sent out the episode as it was. But luckily, the racial tensions the episode amplified helped hide that little mistake.
Yeah, nobody seemed to care about the razor effect in the face of all the, stereotyping and prejudice.
Right. So, in a way, it's really a good thing that the episode was so racially charged.
Yeah, I think butterfly effect, right? One of the special effects guys gets fired, and ultimately we don't have the great effect of Geordi turning into a lizard person in season 6. So
absolutely, yes.
Thank God for that. But everybody, that will do it for episode 3 of the Readier Room. We hope you enjoyed Code of Honor as much as we did. And until next time, everybody, stay ready.
The troublesome little man-child.
Consider that in the history of many worlds, there have always been disposable creatures.
Do you consider yourself superior to us?
Should have told him to mind his own damn business.
When I stroke the beard thusly, do I not appear more intellectual?
Computer! Freeze program.
It's not a promising beginning.